So for today's lesson, we are going to go over how to solve inequalities with variables on both sides. Now, before we get into the actual lesson, let's think back into the stuff we've just finished doing in Unit 1. In Unit 1, we had a very similar lesson to this that said to solve equations with variables on both sides. The difference between the two is that in this case, we're working with inequalities, whereas before we were working with equations. Outside of that, it's going to be very, very similar to what we did then. So let's go ahead and start on the notes. Let me share my screen. Ba-da-ba. All right, so you all should be able to see my screen. And if you see, it says solving inequalities with variables on both sides. Last week or so, week before last maybe, we did the same thing, but with equations. So let us begin. When we want to solve inequalities with the variables on both sides, we are going to use the distributive property. First, that's going to be our first step. Once we have distributed anything that we need to distribute, then we are going to combine our like terms, add them up, subtract them, whatever is going to be happening. And after we combine our like terms, we're going to use our inverse or opposite operations to move the variables to the left side and the numbers to the right. Now that's kind of an important part for how we're going to be doing this. Moving our variables to the left and our numbers to the right. That's going to help us out when we go to graph these, right? So when we isolate our variable, after we isolate our variable, that's going to be our fourth step. It's going to be to isolate the variable. But remember that if you multiply or divide across the inequality to both sides of the inequality, if you do that with a negative number, then you must switch the inequality symbol. So you must switch the inequality symbol. You must do that. If you do not do that, you will get an incorrect answer. So looking at these steps, they look very, very similar to the steps that we had when solving equations. All right. So now let's go through. We are going to do some of these. I'm going to do the odds. You all are going to do the evens for classwork. All right. To finish up your notes in class. And then you have another classwork after this. All right. So number one, let's start with number one. Number one says 3x plus 7 is greater than 4x plus 9. So my first step is to distribute, use my distributive property. Do I have anything to distribute? I don't. Then I'm going to combine my like terms. To combine my like terms, I don't have any like terms on this side of the equation. And so now I'm going to start moving things. I'm going to use my inverse operations to move my variables to the left and my numbers to the right. So let's go ahead and start that. So if I move this 4 over, to move this 4 over to my left side, I'm going to subtract 4x. And I promise one day I'll get good with writing with this mouse. Minus 4x on both sides. 4x minus 4x goes to 0. And then what I have is going to be this negative x plus 7 is greater than 9. And that first step is very similar to what we did for the last lesson with this stuff. All right. And so now what I'm going to do is subtract this 7 from both sides. Minus 7, minus 7. Pop, pop. Oops. Ooh. 7 minus 7 is going to be a 0. And then what I have is this negative x is greater than, and then 9 minus 7 is just going to give me a 2. Excuse me. And now we still have this negative x. Anytime we have a negative number right here, remember that there's an imaginary 1 going on right there, right? That's just a 1. And so I'm going to divide by this negative 1 to get rid of it. but in all actuality, we're for the most part just flopping it over. But just so you know what we're actually doing, I'll go ahead and write it out. I'm going to divide by -1, divide by -1. So our steps are what our steps are going to be. And then what I have is this x. And now since I've divided across that inequality, I've divided both sides of that inequality by a negative number, I have to flip that inequality. I have to switch it, okay? So instead of it being greater than, now we have this less than. And the 2 divided by -1 is going to be a -2. And our answer is x is less than -2. Let me slide this over just a little bit so that's in line with the one above. All right. And so now when we go to draw our graph, our inequality, I'm going to head and just put -2 right here in the middle, -2, and then closer to 0 is going to be -1, and then further out it's going to be -3. Now, if you think back to our last set of notes, we had open circles and closed circles to deal with. When we had a greater than or a less than sign, it was an open circle. So that's what I'm going to use here. I'm going to use this open circle. And then also, if you think back to that last lesson, I told you all that when our x is on this left side, which is why we want to solve with our variables on the left, we can draw our arrow in the direction that the sign is facing. So our point is going that way, to the left. And so we could just draw our sign that way to the left. But there we go. All right. So like I said, I'm going to do the odds. You all are going to do the evens. I just did number 1. Now let me move on to number 3. Number 3 says 1/2 x minus 9 is less than 2x. So we're going to move our variables to the left and our numbers to the right. But Mr. Williams, how are we going to move that 2x? Instead of moving our 2x first so that we still have something over there, I'm going to move this 9 first. See what I did there? Just change the order, but we're going to still cover the same steps. So we're going to take this 9, our opposite operation, going to be to add 9 to both sides, plus 9, plus 9. And I realize that this is kind of adding a step to the process, but just so that we get used to having our variables on the left and reading and writing our graphs like that, that's how I'm going to keep this process going. All right, so we add our 9 to both sides. We have this 1 over 2x, plus 9 minus 9 goes to 0. And then this 2x and this 9, those aren't like terms. So we just kind of write that out. 1/2 x is less than 2x plus 9. All right, remember, these are not like terms. These don't have the same variables or powers or anything like that. This is a 2x and this is just a 9. We are not going to combine those. That is not going to be 11x, all right? So be careful with that. And so now we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. Minus 2x, minus 2x. 2x minus 2x goes to 0. And what I have left where's my, oh, there we go. All right. Usually I don't like changing numbers to decimals, but in the case, since we're graphing these on a number line, it is okay. You can change this 1/2 x to 0.5 x. So let's go ahead and just rewrite this as 0.5 x minus 2x. This is going here. This 0.5 and this -2. So 0.5x minus 2x is going to give me a negative 1.5x plus, oh no, not plus, I'm sorry, is less than, since that 2 is gone, we would just have this 9, it's less than 9. And the only reason that I feel like it's okay to use decimals instead of fractions, because usually I prefer fractions, is that we're graphing these on a number line. All right, so now my next step to get this x by itself, to isolate this x, is going to be to divide by 1.5, divide by 1.5. And now what I'm left with is this x over here, negative 1.5. Ooh, almost missed that. Don't forget that negative sign, and that will throw your answer off. So now I have this negative 1.5 divided by negative 1.5. So I have x on this side, but since I've divided both sides by this negative sign, I've divided across this inequality, I must flip my sign. I had a less than, now I have a greater than. And then this 9 divided by a 1.5 or a negative 1.5. Don't forget that negative 1.5 is going to be 6, all right? So now that I have this, I am going to go and graph it, and I'm going to start off with this 6 right here in the middle, a 7 going that way, and then a 5 coming this way. All right, this is just greater than, not greater than or equal to, just greater than. And so this is going to be an open circle. And I'm going to, since my variable's on the left, I can just point my arrow in the direction that this is pointing, and it's pointing that way to the right. So I'm going to draw my arrow to the right. There we go. That's 3 done. Let's look at 5. Number 5 says 9x minus 5 times the quantity x minus 5 is less than or equal to 4 times the quantity 4x minus 3. Now this might look confusing, but if we follow our steps like we did before, it won't be a problem at all. So I see, actually I want to use a different color. I see this 5 needs to get distributed to that x and to this negative 5 on this side. And then I also see that this 4 needs to get distributed to the x and to this negative 3. Now remember, I always keep my signs with the number that follows them. Okay, so this isn't a positive 5, this is a negative 5. So my first step, now that we have the chance to distribute, is going to be to distribute. And once I do that, once I do my distribution, I have this 9x. Negative 5 times x is going to be a negative 5x. So 9x minus 5x. Then I have this negative 5 times another negative 5. A negative times a negative is a positive, so we have a plus 25. And I'm just going to write my equation again. And for you all who don't know how to write this greater than or equal to or less than or equal to sign, when you are in the equation editor, as I am over here, you just type the sign. In this case, it's less than, and then you just type equal to behind it. And that's how I did it. All right. And so now I'm going to keep on distributing. This 4 times this x is just going to be a 4x. And then this 4 times this negative 3 is going to be a negative 12. And there we have it. Our first step is done. We have distributed. Now we must combine our like terms. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just underline my like terms on both sides. On this side, I have this 9x and this negative 5x. And then that's it. Those are all like terms I have. So once I combine those, let me scoot this up a little bit. And let's redo this. All right. Negative 5x and 9x. So now that I have these terms written out, this 9x minus the 5x is going to be a 4x. And I'm going to keep everything else the same. Plus that 25 is less than or equal to 4x minus 12. And I'm just going to line up my inequality signs. Okay, now I have this 4x plus 25 is less than or equal to 4x minus 12, okay? Minus 12. Ooh, that's not a 4x. That should be a 5x. In the world. Okay. 5x, 4x. Okay, now I'm going to subtract. I'm going to move my variable terms over to my left. So I'm going to subtract minus 4x. And actually, I want to use a different color. I like to do my work in this bright pink color because it's easier to see. Ooh, that's real rough. Minus 4x minus 4x. 4x minus 4x, 0. 5x minus 4x is just x. 1x, but I'm not writing that one. Plus 25. is less than or equal to negative 12. And I'm going to bring over this 25 now by subtracting. Minus 25, minus 25. 25 minus 25 goes to 0. And what I have left, if this is this x is less than or equal to, and then we have a negative 12 minus 25, minus 25, or negative 12 plus a negative 25. And that's going to give me, what is that, 37? Or negative 37, all right? And so now we are going to go over here to our graph. And I'm going to start off by writing my number in the middle. That's negative 37. And then a negative 36 and a negative 38. All right. So now if you guys think back to that first set of notes, anytime we had greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, we had a closed circle. So I'm going to draw my circle and I'm going to color it in. Ooh, it's okay to color outside the lines every now and then. That's what I did. All right. And so now since we have our variable on the left side, we are just going to draw our line in the direction that that symbol is pointing. So I'm going to use this color outside the lines as part of my graph. Pow. There we go. And that one is done. All right, now let's look at number 7. We hate word problems. Just kidding. We don't really hate word problems. We just have to be careful. Be careful when we're doing these. All right. So let's take our time, read through the problem, and go from there. We're going to set it up, read through it, set it up, and then solve it. The setup seems to be the hard part oftentimes, so let's be careful. Let's start off by reading it. The directions say, write and solve an inequality that describes each situation below. I'll do number 7. You guys will do number 8. Number 7 says, you make a profit of $5.25 from each magazine you sell. Write, solve, and graph an inequality to show how many magazines you need to sell in order to earn, a minimum of $168. All right. So we need to first figure out what our variable is. Figure out what we're, and then everything else after that. So we sell, usually our variable is indicated by the term each, whatever comes after that, or per, or something like that, all right? So if I read this, I see the word each. Let's use a different color here. Each comes right before this term magazine. So each magazines is going to be our variable. How many magazines do we need to sell? So that's our variable. That's what we're trying to figure out. That's going to be our X. And then we make a profit of $5.25 from each magazine. So for each magazine we sell, our profit goes up $525, not 500, $5.25. So knowing that, we can set up part of our equation as $5.25x, okay? And then we have some more words, and then it asks us, how many magazines do we need to sell to earn a minimum of $168? Now, if you go back at your notes from the last lesson, you see that we have those keywords, and the minimum tells us it's going to be, greater than or equal to, all right? So that's not something you have to think about really too much. Just look at the notes, it'll tell you, and then you want to start to put these in your memory so you don't have to look at your notes each time. All right, and now we have this 168. So now we're going to solve this like normal. And this looks like a pretty simple one-step equation. All right, so my first step is going to be to divide both sides by 525, but I'm sure you knew that. By 525. Ooh, that's kind of rough looking, but that's okay. My 525 divided by 525, it's going to be 1. Those divide out, so I just have this x. And then I have 168 divided by 525, $5.25. It's going to give me a 32. So we need to sell a minimum of 32 magazines to make a profit A minimum, we need to sell 32 magazines to make a minimum profit of 168. So now let's graph this. And let's not forget our units just because. Just kidding. No, I don't need those right now. Let's graph this. Don't I have a shape tool? Insert line. Let's make the line black from here. All right, that's where we're going to graph from. And let me just go ahead and draw arrows because lines don't stop. Okay, so like before, I'm going to put my number in the middle, 32, 33, and then 31. This is a greater than or equal to. Think back to the last set of notes, and with greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, we have a closed circle. So I'm going to draw this circle and I'm going to fill it in. All right, that's good enough. And now just look at where the direction that the sign is pointing. It's pointing to the right. And so that's the direction my arrow is going to go, to the right. All right. So go ahead and fill in the problems that I have not done, the even problems, and you're going to turn that in. Okay. If you run into questions, feel free to ask me. I'll be right in class with you. Yeah. All right, go ahead and get started. And turn this in when you're done. So now that we finished going through the notes, did you notice anything strange? If not, it's okay. Let's take another look at it. And let's point out a couple of things that you all want to be careful of when you all are doing this yourself. So let's go look back at number 3. Number 3, I divided down here at this step. Let me circle it so you guys can see where I am. Let's do this bigger circle right here. This is the step I'm at. I divided by a negative 1.5. I divided a positive number by a negative number, but I left this 6 here as just a positive number. Should that be that? No. It shouldn't. That should be a negative number. And so now that this is a negative number, I need to go over and adjust my graph. My graph should have negative numbers in it. So I have that negative 6, and then I need to change the order of these two. So this is a negative 6, then a negative 5, and then a negative 7. All right. If you didn't catch that, that's okay. I didn't catch it when I was going through the first time, but if you did, awesome stuff indeed. It's important that we review the stuff that we do to look for mistakes. But this was not the only one. So you got 2 chances to catch a possible mistake. Let's look back here at number 5. Number 5, right here on this step here, I made the mistake of that's a terrible circle. There we go. This step is where I messed up. I have this 9x minus 5x. And then here I wrote 5x. 9x minus 5x isn't 5x. 9x minus 5x is 4x. And that is going to change the stuff that we have. All right, so knowing that 9x, that's not a 4, that's just x, is 4x. All right, so now knowing that we have this, it's going to change up the way things look. So we have this 4x minus 4x. That's going to be 0. And that's going to look like this. Just a 25 is less than or equal to a negative 12. Is that a true statement? Is 25 less than or equal to negative 12? No. 25 is not less than or equal to negative 12. So now that we have realized that this is false, let's go ahead and type out false. And I'm going to type it in bright red letters, F-A-L-S-E, false. Now that we know that this is false, this we can tell that this has no solution. So since this is false, this has no solution. And that's what we call it when we solve or try to solve an inequality and we come up with something that is a non-true statement, like what we did with the solving equations and the types of solutions there, how we had anytime we had a mathematical statement that was not true, we got it to be no solution. Anytime we get a mathematical statement here that is not true, we get a no solution. So there's going to be no graph for this or anything. This is no solution. If you missed this, that's okay. If you caught it, that's awesome. But now that you've seen my mistakes in here, you know that mistakes do happen. Be careful with your own mistakes. All right. All right. Now keep on working on the classwork. All right. Bye-bye.